In this video, I'll be running through building and using Specter-DIY, a Bitcoin hardware device that you can build yourself using general purpose off-the-shelf components. While Specter-DIY is more expensive than other DIY options I've looked at, there are actually a variety of different configurations available that bring the security and the functionality of Specter-DIY up onto the same level that you would find in things like the Cold Card Q, Keystone, or Foundation Passport. So basically in this video, I'll just be looking at some of the different hardware options for Specter-DIY, starting at the simplest and the cheapest and looking all the way up to the most expensive and complex, and looking at some of the different functionality and features that each of those add along the way. So let's get into it. And if you haven't already done so, hit subscribe, and that way you can stay in the loop for content I make to help you find your way in the crazy and often hostile environment that is cryptocurrency. So first things first, every single option we look at here is going to need one of these development boards. You can actually order those now just either directly from ST or from a local electronics distributor in your region, and you can get them for about 60 USD. And once we've taken that out of the box, the instructions on how to get started are written here on the back. So basically we can just make sure firstly that JP2, that's this connector here, is in the middle, which is on ST-Link. That's how it should come straight out of the box. And this header over here has a connector on it as well. And then what we need to do is connect to this mini USB connector here on the top. And basically if I just plug that in, you'll see it opens up just like a USB stick, and we have basically just two files here on the card. So basically we can just copy files into here and it will actually let us flash them onto the board. So basically what we're going to do is head over to the Specter-DIY GitHub and just head down to the releases page, and I'll just click through there to the latest release. And basically we can see here that it has two sets of files. We can have an upgrade file, or we can have this file here that we can put onto an empty board. We'll download the initial firmware, we'll download the SHA-256 signatures, and we'll also download the signing key for the Specter releases. And if you're on Windows, you'll need to do something like install GPG for Win and import and certify the signing keys that we just downloaded. And I'll run through the process on how to do that in this video over here. Once we've correctly imported the signing key for at least the Specter releases and we have GPG for Win working properly, we can just go into here and just say verify. And there we go, so we can see that this text file here has a valid signature that was signed by the Specter release signing key. So what I can do then is just open that file up, and I can double check for myself that the SHA-256 of the firmware I downloaded matches the expected hash over here. That all checks out, so we are now good to copy this file onto this device. The process of doing that is really easy. So all I do is just click copy, navigate onto the folder that popped up when I connected the device, right click, and just say paste. There we go, and as soon as that file finishes copying on there, you'll actually see that it is now automatically applied the firmware, and we can see also now that it says that the read protection has been set on this device here. So just flashing the firmware for this device has actually locked it down a bit, not so much that we can't recover it if we need to. Press power button to reboot. Now we don't actually have a power button on here, so we will just unplug that and plug it back in again. So there we go. So all the software stuff is done, and we can actually start using this device. The first thing I'm going to do is just unplug the power, and I'm actually going to adjust this jumper at the top here. Now this part actually is personal preference, but for me, I would prefer to put this jumper here onto the USB connector on the header here. And basically what that means is that once I have the thing on there, if I connect power to this top port up here, it will actually not power on the main device itself, nor will it allow me to use this programming interface to do anything, including factory resetting the board. So basically once I have changed that header over there to say USB, I actually power the device and communicate with it using this micro USB connector at the bottom. And you will see that that will now power the device up, and we can use it to both power and communicate with this device if we want to. And the reason why I mention this is there are some 3D printed cases out there which obscure the bottom ports of the device. Basically, if you use one of those, you will need to make sure that header stays on the ST-Link selector on those jumpers. And I'm just going to use this case here, which is a modified version of one of the ones on the Specter-DIY GitHub, and I'll put a link to this in the description where you can find it on my principles page. So there we go, this is our simplest possible Specter-DIY device, where all the signing will either have to happen using a MicroSD card, very similar to an old cold card or something like that, or happen over USB, just like a traditional hardware wallet. So I will just power that up. So when we power it on and are prompted to choose a pin, you'll notice that it is telling us that it is using the internal storage, that's the internal flash on this device, and is giving us an anti-phishing word. Now this anti-phishing word is actually unique not only to this device here, but this installation of the firmware on this device. If I were to factory reset this, I would get different anti-phishing words, or if I were to connect a different Specter-DIY device, it gives me a completely different set of anti-phishing words just because the encryption keys on this device are different to the ones on here. But anyway, I'll just set my pin to be 1234. This is the screen we start with. So I will just say generate new key, and for the sake of simplicity, I'll just stick with a 12-word seed, though we could switch that to be 24 if we want to. And the other neat thing we can do with Specter is we can actually click on any of the words and actually edit that word itself. Just changing the bits in there, and you'll see that word changes as well as the checksum one if you don't want to trust the random number generator in here, and it now has generated that seed. And you can actually see that we still have a scan QR code button there, so I can just go into the settings, for example, and to basically just turn off some of the different things. So if I go into communication, I can just turn the QR scanner off because I don't have one connected, so it won't actually do anything, and then say confirm. And likewise, you'll see in here, we can also turn USB communication on and off. We will just leave USB communication off for the moment anyway, and just use this in air-gapped mode. So I'll just leave that as is and say confirm. You'll see also there's SD card. We will leave that enabled because I would like to use the SD card for some signing and things. So we'll just go back. And you'll see now that I've turned off the QR code scanner, that menu option is gone. If I go into wallets, you'll see that default, that's the one that I just generated just before, and it gives me a Bitcoin address here. So I can actually just send some Bitcoin there. Okay, so that Bitcoin is on its way. So basically this is just a standard address explorer. We can sort of click through and see all of the different addresses. We can give them nicknames. We can also go into settings and do things like export the wallet descriptor. So in this instance, I can just say show QR code. And if I go into Sparrow, I can just say File, New Wallet. I'll just call this Specter and say OK. And basically here, I can say that I want an air-gapped hardware wallet. I can go down to Specter-DIY and just say Scan. There we go. And it has picked up our wallet descriptor. So I'll just say Apply. I won't worry about a password. And basically, if I go up here to transactions, there we go, we can actually see those funds that I sent directly to the initial QR code. So I'll just say close. So if we put an SD card into the MicroSD slot on there, the other interesting thing is if we go into this key management page, we can do things like enter a BIP39 passphrase. We could show the recovery phrase again if we hadn't written it down the first time round, or we can store the private keys to either the internal flash that's on this device itself encrypted, or we can actually save the private key to a MicroSD card. So if I just click MicroSD card, I'll just call it Demo1. So basically it is saving the keys to the MicroSD card. Now, before you freak out about saving your private keys digitally to the MicroSD card, what makes this very clever is that this file here has actually been encrypted using the encryption keys that were generated when this device first started up. So they are unique not only to this hardware device, but this specific installation of Specter. So basically what happens now that I've saved that key to the MicroSD card is if I just unplug the power there, and if I power this device back up, log in with my PIN, there we go. Basically, if I click on load key, I can actually see that set of private keys there that I just created, Demo1. And where it gets very interesting is if I just say cancel on there, if I just put this same MicroSD card in this other Specter device that has the same pin and everything, and say load key, it actually won't find any file at all. And that's not just because it didn't handle the MicroSD card being inserted, while it was running. Basically that backup on this MicroSD card is tied to this specific installation of Specter on this device. And if I plug this MicroSD card back in over here and say load key, I can see my key Demo1 is still there, which is fantastic. Again, so this is a great feature that allows you to have fast, secure and distributed storage of your private key material, such that someone would have to have not only the digital file that was encrypted onto the microSD card, but they would also need to have your specific Specter-DIY device and the correct PIN that is able to unlock the device to be able to regain access to the digital copy of your wallet. Though it's important to say, I definitely still recommend keeping an actual written down offline copy of your seed words, but a digital copy like this is fantastic to have, particularly with just a base device, no secure elements or anything else like that, just the entry level option with a microSD card. So basically then to make a transaction, I can just go over here to Sparrow, I can hit send, I'll just add in a tip address, I'll just send the maximum amount, and I'll just say create transaction. There we go, so finalize transaction for signing, and I'm going to save the transaction to a microSD card. So I'll just remove this microSD card, save the transaction onto it, and basically then, let's go with the microSD card back in here. See, open SD card file. So there is my PSBT file, so return 1.psbt. I can check that this transaction matches what I'm expecting to see over here in Sparrow. I can say confirm. So there we go. So that transaction has been signed, and it's actually saved the signed version of it back to the microSD card. But I can actually also just show that as a QR code, just because sending data from here back to the computer is no problem at all. I'll just choose Crypto PSBT and just say scan QR over here on Sparrow. And there we go. So that transaction is back and signed, and I can just say broadcast. And there we go. So basically that is the very basic option for Specter, which again, in my opinion, is actually very usable. Zero additional hardware assembly required. All you really need is a 3D printed case. And even if you don't have access to a 3D printer and want to do something easy and janky, you could seriously just, cut this up with a bit of sticky tape and glue and have yourself a janky DIY case for zero cost. All right, so the next thing I want to look at is adding a QR code scanner to our Specter-DIY device. This improves our quality of life in a number of ways. It means we can do things like import a SeedQR. If you're someone who wants to run statelessly, it means we can load our transactions in over PSBT QR codes, and it also means it makes things like address verification for receive addresses much easier to do. So we've got our Specter device, we'll just unplug it for now, and what we're going to do is add this Wave Share barcode scanner module. So we're going to add this onto here, and basically the first thing we're going to do is open this case back up because we're going to need to wire this in. So what we're going to do is we are just going to take the back of the case off. I'm actually going to leave this in here because what I have here is a different 3D printed back case that actually has a bit more space in there for the camera, as well as a shroud that goes over this board and makes it really easy to connect the camera in to the right pins, as well as to mount the camera facing towards the back. There are some cases that sort of hang the camera out the bottom, but my preference is to have a device that is, about this size, still gives us access to all of our ports. So I'll be going with this approach here. This is actually a modified version of the snap case, and files to 3D print this yourself can be found on my printables page, and there's a link in the description. Though the first step in this process is actually disassembling this a little bit and mounting it on this board. Just take this camera module off, so we're going to undo these two screws on the bottom. You could actually leave this bit connected if you want to, but I'm just going to loosen that off and just remove this so we don't accidentally break that cable working with it. Next thing I want to do is remove these 4 screws from the bottom because we don't need them. So basically now we have our board and we have our camera module. So first thing we're going to do is actually stick this camera module in here like this. So basically what we do is come in here at an angle, the corners of it sort of tuck under those little bits that stick up there, and basically then we can just move it down and press it. And it should sit down, it should be a nice snug fit between the two little raised bits in there. Insert this camera module into this part here, and the cable is going to go through this gap here so it doesn't get squashed or pinched or anything else like that. So we're just going to put it in like this and just sort of slide that down a bit. It doesn't go the whole way in though, so we're going to push it down until these two holes line up with these holes here. So we'll push that down until we can see them in there, and then we're going to put those two little tiny black screws that we pulled out before into there to hold it in place. There we go. So basically now we are going to make sure this clip here is still open, so the little black bit is slid out, and we're going to feed this into that slot there. So once we've got the tip of it in, we just sort of push it down, the rest will slide in, And then once all the silver bits we can see are in there, we can just tighten that back up again. Next thing that we are going to do is get the wires that come with it. Basically this plug just goes in the bottom here. And basically what is going to happen is we are going to coil these cables around, and they're basically going to be fed through these little gaps here, just so that it's nice and tidy. So basically now this board will actually just sit down nicely over all of these things here. There we go. It's a nice little fit. And what we're going to do is we are going to basically get some pin header, and this actually is a double length pin header, so I'll just snap off 4 of those. Oop, that was 5. That's okay. And I'm actually going to pull the pins out of the black plastic and just bend them in half. And basically what I'm then going to do is stick these little right angled things into the socket like that, and then place that into the corresponding hole. So green goes into the G. So those are our 2 power pins. Once we've connected this, now let's just test some things. So firstly, when I plug power into it, it should basically beep straight away if our power connectors are in right. So I'll just connect that in. There you go, you heard that beep. So what we'll do now is we'll turn it over, I'll just hold that on with my finger, and we'll check that these 2 are working correctly, because these pins can be a little bit fiddly. So I'll just unlock. So I'm going to go into device settings, go into communication, I'm going to turn on the QR code scanner, because I had that off before, so I'll turn it on, turn on the aim light, and look, I'll turn on the flashlight for now, just because that makes it easy for testing, and say close, and go back. And then go back. I'm just going to say I want to import a recovery phrase and a scan QR code, and if that's working, there we go, I can actually see that the flashlight and the little red light have turned on. That tells me everything is connected correctly, which is great. So I'll just say cancel and just close up that case, and then we'll test this out with a real SeedQR. So I'll just unplug that. So now it is in its case, and we can actually see it is a bit thicker than the previous one was, but it's still not too bad. And we can also still use the MicroSD if we want to, but it's nice because the camera just sits flush there at the back. So we can just power that on. It'll beep now that it has that reader in it. It'll unlock it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and say next. So now what I can do is I can say I want to import a recovery phrase, and I'm going to say I want to scan a QR code. And because this is a barcode scanner, like on a cold card queue, we don't actually get a picture of what we're scanning, we just have to use this red line to help us to see what it is looking at. So I will actually just scan this SeedQR here that I generated just now. There we go, so we can hear it beeped. And now I can see that it has loaded the same seed words that I was using before. So here I'll just say confirm. And now we have that same seed before. This time we've loaded it by a compact SeedQR. Now for this next example, we will actually use Specter Desktop, because it doesn't seem like Sparrow quite supports generating receive addresses that this can scan in a format that it expects to do the proper verification. So I'll just use Specter, and for now I'll just say Electrum connection just to get this up and running quickly. There we go. And I'll just add my device back in. So let's just say add device, so Specter-DIY. And I'll just say scan QR code. So over here on wallets, I'll just say master public keys, single key. There we go. And show it that. There we go. So we will just use the standard single sig wallet. So we'll say continue. I'll select demo. There we go. And say continue. And we'll just say create single key wallet. Imported will leave the wallet name as demo, and there is the public key that we just imported. So I'll just say create wallet. There we go. And I'll skip the backup PDF just for now. Okay, here we go. And if I go into transactions now, we can actually see those transactions that I made before in Sparrow. So now I'll just go into here and hit receive in Specter Desktop, and I'll just scroll down here and say verify address via QR code. So basically now I'll just close this over here, so back, I'll say scan QR code, so we'll scan that off the screen. There we go, it's beeped, sitting and thinking about it, and there we go. So it has verified that receive address we're seeing on our computer on the hardware device itself, which is fantastic. So we'll send some Bitcoin there now. There we go, so Bitcoin is on the way. So I'll just say close over here on the device, and over here in Specter Desktop, I'll just go back into transactions. And there we go, so that transaction has showed up. It's not confirmed yet, but we'll be able to send it. So now if I click that I want to go into send, just paste in an address to go back to the tip wallet, we'll just say send max, and then say create unsigned transaction. There we go. So there is our transaction. So I also want to sign the transaction with the device demo. So I'll click on that and I'll just sign with QR codes. So there it is. So basically over here, I'll say scan QR code. There we go. You can hear it's beeped. There we go. So there is our transaction. I can verify the address details all look correct with what I'm expecting on my wallet. And if so, I can just say confirm. There is my transaction. So I can just say scan signed transaction. There it is. And basically now I can just say send transaction. And there we go. And the key thing to say here is that the actual transaction signing workflow using QR codes would have worked just the same using Sparrow or something like Blue Wallet on mobile. You know, you don't need to use Specter Desktop for these things. But there, as you can see, it's definitely a quality of life improvement in terms of being able to load seeds into the device using SeedQR or compact SeedQR, if that's what you want to do, to be able to verify receive addresses as well as being able to seamlessly send a transaction without having to juggle microSD cards. So the last thing we're looking at is the most feature complete way to use Specter-DIY, and that is Specter Shield. Basically this allows us to have both a Smartcard reader for secure storage of secrets as well as things like a battery, all tied up in a nice form factor. So basically this is a Specter Shield board here. Basically we have a Smartcard reader. This actually has the barcode scanner built into it and a battery on the back, and you can actually see here the little pins where this basically sits straight onto the development board that we were using earlier. Now this is a good spot to say that the availability of these Specter Shield boards has been a challenge over the years. This particular board I'm working on here I got from the Bitcoin Frankenstein store, which as of today does actually still have a few of them in stock. And in terms of just getting your hands on the Specter Shield board itself, I've also given up waiting for them to come back in stock through official channels, so have started the process of getting some of these fabricated, and I'll let you know in a few months how that goes, and hopefully this should make it much easier for them to be generally available again for those who want them. So watch this space. Alright, so I'll just show you how we install this board. So I'll actually put this one off to the side and I'll be working on this sort of naked version of it here. So first thing I'm going to do is just open up this 3D printed case. Now, first thing I want to do on this board here is actually change this header pin here so that the power is coming from the external 5-volt input on the board. So we're just going to move this header up to the top because the power is not going to come from any of these USB sockets but from the Specter Shield board itself. And basically then what we can do is you can see that the header pins on the Specter Shield line up with the pins on the development board itself, and the whole thing is just a press fit together like that. So basically once it's together like that, I can actually just press this button on the side here and you'll see that that will turn the device on, and we can be happy that everything is working correctly. So now we'll just put this in a case so I don't short everything out on the desk. And while the Specter device I bought did actually come fully assembled in a nice 3D printed case, I'll just be putting it in another one of these blue ones, the alternative Specter Shield case, and you can find the link to get that here. And there we go. So now we've got the case assembled. The key difference here is that we've got the Smartcard slot. So now we'll press the power button and that will turn on, just running on its own battery power, nothing required. And we can see here it's running off internal storage. We have seen how that works before, so I'll just turn that off. But what I'll show you now is what happens when we put one of these smart cards in the back. So I'll just put that there with the contact facing down and turn it on. There we go. And basically we are back to our choose your PIN code screen. So essentially what is happening now is rather than using the encryption keys on the flash of the device, it's actually using encryption keys on the smart card itself to do all of the things that I showed you earlier in this video. So I'll just set the PIN on this smart card to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can do something like I'll just import the recovery phrase from the SeedQR that I had before. And basically now what I can do here, I can actually go into the settings and to go into smart card storage and save the private keys, save that seed to this smart card. So I can say save keys to card. And what I can do here is I can either save the seed either encrypted on this card or using plain text. And basically here, these two modes are very similar to how we could save the keys onto a microSD card, in that if I encrypt the secret and save it onto the smart card, not only do I need to have the smart card and the PIN, but I have to have this specific Spectre device and this specific installation of Spectre to be able to do anything with it. Whereas if I say keep as plain text, I could take this smart card, use it with a different Spectre device and access those private keys. Now again, the key thing to understand here is that the smart card itself still provides a very high level of physical security to the private keys themselves, has its own PIN counter and stuff like that. So again, fantastic options in terms of how you can securely store keys in a way that either allows you to move them around and use them between different Spectre devices, or store them in a way that places no trust in the smart card itself, but still leverages the physical security that it provides. So in this instance, I'll just say encrypt. So there we go. So the key is now stored on the smart card. And the really great thing about this is if I just remove those smart cards, I can actually still use this device in exactly the same way that I could in the previous steps on this video, either just using the internal storage, using it statelessly, or with a microSD card. And nothing on this device actually gives away that there are secrets stored on other smart cards at all. So again, a really great device to have that allows you to privately have secure digital backups that are easy to transport, nice and discreet, can be securely stored with other people or off-site, while not giving away the fact that these things exist on the hardware itself. So that is Specter-DIY, an impressive open source project that has been around for a while, but one that allows you to have a variety of different levels of functionality and cost depending on what you're looking for. All of the different options for Spectre that I've showed you automatically lock down the bootloader and have the device attest to the authenticity of its firmware. All of the firmware updates actually happen by just copying a file onto the microSD card and will only accept a trusted and signed update. It's also really accessible as far as DIY projects go, in that on the software side you don't actually have to install and compile and build anything complicated like that to flash the firmware onto the device. And on the hardware side, the great thing about this is that the assembly is actually very straightforward. None of the setups require any soldering at all, and if you just go with the basic naked device, you don't need to assemble anything. It will just work straight out of the box. If you want to find out more about Spectre or hear experiences other users have had, the Specter-DIY Telegram group is definitely a good place to go. And as always, if you have any questions about Specter-DIY or any experiences you've had either trying to build it or actually using it, definitely just leave a reply in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer everything. Other than that, stay safe. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. Hit like if you think that other people would find this video useful, and hit subscribe if you'd like to be kept in the loop about future content I make that helps people stay safe in the crypto space and to recover if they get into trouble. If you have any questions about this video or a topic that you'd like me to cover, just leave a reply.